In this video, we're going to look at some good and bad examples of body paragraphs in terms of how they use the parts of an argument, claim, evidence, and analysis, and how they put that all together. So I have a topic here which would really be for a definition essay. It's defining what marriage is. So it says marriage should be, and it gives two criterias, and then it says regardless of, saying these are not the criteria. And these examples I'm going to show you are dealing with the last one, saying being able to produce biological children should not be a criteria. So what I want you to do is, for each of these three, I have three body paragraphs here. Pause the video, read it, and then decide whether you think it's an effective body paragraph in its use of claim, evidence, and analysis. Think about what we talked about in the previous video, and then we'll come back and I'll talk about it. All right, so pause the video and read A first. Okay, so A is not an effective body paragraph. The topic sentence is okay, so its claim is acceptable. But then the rest of it lacks evidence. It says there must be millions of heterosexual married couples who don't have children and don't want to. Well, if you're going to make a claim like that, you need the number. You should do some research, find out what is the statistic on that. Also, some gay couples do have children. I bet we could all name an example. When I read this the first time, I thought immediately, well, you, the writer, should be naming the examples. So it lacks evidence, and that's why this paragraph really never gets off the ground. It's underdeveloped, because if you don't have evidence and you're just making general statements, you're never going to be able to get very far with your writing. Those are the kind of people who say, I don't know how I can meet the word count. Well, it's because they don't have the content. They don't have the evidence. All right, let's move up to B. Pause the video and let's look at that one. All right, coming back, this is a very effective body paragraph in its use of claim, evidence, analysis, and I want to go through it here. So this part, really the first two sentences, is what I would call the claim part. It's a rebuttal, so it sets up the other side first, and then the true topic sentence would be here, right, which is you don't need to have children to be considered married. And we'll talk about how to set up a rebuttal paragraph when we get to that topic. But that's the claim, and it's a good, clear, specific claim. And then after the claim, we don't just jump into evidence. We have some framework analysis here. I'll put the analysis in purple, where it says many heterosexual married couples do not have children because they can't or simply don't want to. So what that does is preparing the reader for the upcoming evidence, not just throwing the evidence out there without any context. So that helps the reader to know to be looking for evidence that shows that a lot of married heterosexual couples don't have children and don't want to or can't. So that really helps them when we get to the actual evidence, which I'll put in green, and here is the statistic. 32% of married couples have never had any children, and that is research. There's the citation. And then we get a little bit of evidentiary analysis, kind of saying why that's important. Well, would we really say these couples aren't married? It's a rhetorical question. So it means, no, we don't say these people aren't married just because they don't have children. So why should that apply to gay married couples? It's also a little bit of pathos too, because it appeals to our values. You know, our value is to say people are married whether they have children or not. And by the way, the kind of evidence that we had here would be logos, because it's a statistic. All right. Next, we get some more framework analysis. So another preview of upcoming evidence. Beyond this, there's also the fact that many gay couples do have children. So before just throwing out the evidence, it's preparing us for that, and then it's giving us really couple sentences of evidence there. I'll put that in green. Some examples: Jane Lynch, Ricky Martin, and then another statistics. 1/4 of all gay couples have children. That's researched. These names, Jane Lynch and Ricky Martin, would be something the writer knew about, common knowledge that they could invoke. So this is logos here, right? These are facts and statistics, examples. All right. Then we get a little more framework analysis, but these aren't the biological offspring of both partners, some might say. So it's sort of anticipating the next issue. And then to give some evidence that's going to address that, we have a quote here. So I'll put that in green, and that would be ethos, right? So that is an expert, and notice we're giving the expert's credentials here, his name, his quote, showing that parents of adopted children have the same degree of affection as parents of biological children. And then after this, we actually have another kind of evidence. It's pathos, because it's an appeal to values. It says, after all, would we really want to tell an adoptive child that his parents love him less, right? So that really is an appeal to our emotions, our values. Okay. Then we get some wrap-up analysis here in the last sentences. So this is something you can do sometimes. It gives some kind of, it's a kind of a framework analysis that's retrospective, right? That looks back on all the evidence that's been provided, and it says, well, it simply isn't logical or compassionate to exclude gay couples from marriage simply because they can't have biological children. So it's saying here, I have logos, right? The logical part, and I have pathos on my side, compassionate, especially that last appeal just before that sentence. And there's also ethos. It's using all three type of evidence, and it's really tying it all together here. All right, so that's a very good example, and you can see it's integrated here. Evidence and analysis are integrated. We, have that pattern of framework analysis, evidence, evidentiary analysis, more framework analysis, evidence, etc. All right, so let's look at the last example and see. So pause the video here, and then we'll come back and talk about it. All right, so this has a couple problems. First of all, the topic sentence really isn't tied to the thesis very well, but the bigger issue is that this writer does not really appreciate who his or her audience is. They're making religious appeals. And the problem with that is, unless the reader of this essay is of the same religion and has the same interpretation of the religious text that this writer does, then that's not going to work. And I can tell you that this is not the majority interpretation of this particular religious text. This is kind of a bit of an unusual one by people like Bishop Jane Robinson, who is gay, and the Metropolitan Community Church, which is a mainly gay church, I believe. So they're really not speaking to a very big audience, not an academic audience. So anybody who isn't Christian is not being persuaded by this. Anybody who is Christian but doesn't agree with this interpretation, which is going to be a pretty big group, that also is not being spoken to by this example. So this really illustrates why these kind of religious appeals don't work. So the good example here is example B. It uses claim, evidence, and analysis very well. It uses all three types of evidence, both types of analysis, and it integrates them very well, not separating them out. All right, so that's your example of how to do a good body paragraph in terms of the parts of an argument.